Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Matt Petrowski, where we are going to be taking a look at FileMaker. We're going to be learning FileMaker throughout the course of this half hour. That's about the time that we're going to spend. I'm recording this live. If you're watching this after the fact as a video, if you have questions, then feel free to post those down below. Otherwise, if you're in the live feed as I'm recording this video, then of course you can put those in the chat, and I'll be showing those on the video periodically. So let's get right into what we're going to be taking a look at today. Today, we are going to be looking at we've been learning the environment from lesson 1 until now, and we're going to be looking at FileMaker's manage layouts. Now, as I stated in lesson 3, the lesson prior, basically the areas that you are interacting with most with FileMaker is the manage database and then also the manage layouts. You're going to be going back and forth between designing your view and putting your structure behind the scenes, and then automating, which is going to be your scripting, and we're going to spend a lot of time taking a look at that. So without further ado, let's head into my database. We'll get my presentation software off screen there so that we can take a look at what's going on. If you'd like to follow along and you have not already created a copy of the invoices database, let me show you how to do that really quickly. As I switch to FileMaker, I already have a copy of the invoices file open, and that's what we're going to be using in this video for you, for those of you following along. We're going to basically go up to, actually new solution won't, or get started won't appear, the menu that I'm looking for. I'll have to close this database. Nice little thing to learn right there. The file menu will show get started as long as you don't have one of FileMaker's pre-created solutions open. So get started. That'll open up your window. I am, by the way, working on a Macintosh computer, obviously. As I scroll down to the See Advanced Solutions, we click on the link there, but it is a copy of FileMaker 16 that I'm working with. If these dialogues have changed at the time that you're watching this video, you simply need to find out how to access FileMaker's templates, and hopefully they haven't gotten rid of the invoices template, which is what we're using for this series of videos. It's been with FileMaker for a long time, and it allows us to go at the same pace with the same content. So I'm going to use my recent menu and open up the invoices solution. We are taking a look at manage layouts. Now, this whole first series, I don't know how many it's going to be, 10 videos, whatever, is totally focused on learning the FileMaker environment. If you don't learn or know the FileMaker environment, oftentimes it's hard to actually create the type of solution that you want to create because you don't know where to go to access what you need to access. So let's take a look here at the manage layouts. So it is in the manage area that we're going to be accessing this and layouts. As I stated, these top menus, these top 5 are where you'll predominantly be spending most of your time. Highly suggest that you learn the key that is associated. You should be able to do pretty much this. I need to go into manage database. I need to get out of manage database by hitting the escape key. I need to manage my layouts and bring those up, and I can close that with Command W or Control W. So a key thing about the manage layouts, first off, is that unlike the manage database, it's not a modal dialog box. You can see that the manage layouts, which I've opened up there with Command Shift L, I can bring up the manage database at the same time so that I can manage the database with the layouts in the background. But as I click, you hopefully hear that little beep that's telling me that I cannot access that dialog until the manage database is closed. Now, the cancel button on this particular dialog, the manage database, which we took a look at yesterday, and we'll be in a lot more when we're taking a look at fields and defining those, can be exited by hitting the escape key. So that's a nice thing to know. If you want to close the manage layouts, it's that Command or Control W. So let's get into the details of this dialog, because there's a lot going on with regards to how you interact with layouts. Now, we've already discussed, and I think it's pretty obvious, that a layout, and you can create pretty much as many as you want. Well, there is a limitation, but it's probably up in the billions or millions, I don't know. We saw those specifications in lesson 3 if you want to check that out. The manage layouts is basically where you are going to be able to interact with all of the different types of layouts that you create. Now, I'm going to define some types for you. There are some overarching major categories of layouts that I've sort of found throughout my development career of what they fall within, but we're going to see here really quickly how FileMaker actually organizes things in their templates. Again, in FileMaker development, like all development, there is no one way to do things. So if you see this FileMaker template and you see all of these layouts of desktop, iPad, iPhone, and web, this is not the only way to organize your layouts. In fact, going way back, FileMaker used to not have the ability to create folders where you could put layouts within. And at one point in time, it didn't even have dividers. You basically just got to have the name of a layout. Now again, as we saw in fields, in this dialog, we of course can reorganize things by clicking this drag arrow and reordering things around. We can do that within the folder as well. This is going to be a quick little tip, and unfortunately, I don't know what it might be on Windows, but I do know on Mac. On Windows, those of you using Windows, you may have to play with this. On the Macintosh, there is that option key. I keep referencing the option key. Option when you hold down the menus. Option when you click the button delete if you want to forcibly delete. Well, again, on the Macintosh, if you hold down the option key when you click a disclosure triangle, what will happen is it will attempt to expand all subfolders within the folder that you expand. And one of the cool things is if you do a Command A, or a Control A, which obviously selects all, what's really nice is that when you select everything in a particular dialog, everything is going to be affected by the action that you take. So if I hold down the Option key and then use one of the arrow keys on my keyboard, in this case I'm doing an option with an arrow going that way, it basically expands the whole dialog, as we can see, or it expands all of the folders. Now, when we get to the manage scripts, this also works there as well. So one of the things that I like to do, it's really nice, if you use a lot of folders to embed things, I just do a Command A, do an arrow the other way, and it just closes everything up, makes it really compact so that I can focus in and drill down to the folder where I want to work with things. All right, so let's go through the elements of this particular dialog. You can see that up here up at the menu, we have this show all where we can filter down to a particular folder. That's really helpful. In fact, I think it was just prior to FileMaker 14, the scripts area had this as well. And what was really cool is you were able to put a lot of scripts that you were working on that focused on a particular area in a particular folder and then focus just on that folder. But they redesigned the scripting area, renamed it to the script workspace, which is what we have now, and took away this particular feature. Hopefully they won't take it away here as well, because being able to just look at those layouts and allowing you to focus on desktop or this folder in particular is really pretty nice. Now, of course, you also have the ability when you are showing all to search. FileMaker has a lot of search available. It's in the scripting dialog. It's within the new layout objects palette. If you come up with a naming system, which is really pretty smart to do while you're creating your layouts, say, for example, all of your layouts that are actually going to generate output are print layouts. If you prefix those with the keyword of print, all you have to do is type in the word print. And then those layouts in particular will filter. You'll have a much smaller set in order to go through in order to find the specific one you're looking for. Because ultimately, no matter what happens when you're developing with FileMaker is your solution grows and grows and grows. And then eventually you've got this monolithic solution. Some stuff is used, some stuff is not used. You have to figure out, is this still being used, this script, or is this layout? Did I make a new layout that replaced it? Finding things becomes very important. So from the very beginning, I suggest a good naming system, and I'll give you some suggestions about that. So we've got the search. Now over here on the side of the dialog is this little checkbox, and this little checkbox basically means I want to present this within FileMaker's user interface. So what we need to know about that is right over here where we have this option to choose a layout, we can see that FileMaker gives us desktop, iPad, iPhone, web, etc. The dividers show as well, and we're able to select from the layouts that you want to use. Now there's two ways that you can approach developing in FileMaker. You can say, I'm going to develop a solution and I'm going to take total control. I'm going to completely make it my own and I'm not going to use the native FileMaker environment. The alternative is say, I'm going to leverage FileMaker's environment and use it to the best of my abilities. So in that regard, that would be using this menu and displaying the layouts that user can go to and teaching them this is how you get to layouts. That's aside from the fact that you can put buttons in the layout that take users to whatever layout you want. So otherwise, if you're not using this particular menu system, FileMaker's native menu system, let's say you're hiding the status bar, which I've just done right now, you're not showing it at all, that's when it really doesn't matter. And in that regard, I would prefer to uncheck everything just in the event that it actually accidentally showed somewhere with a script that you accidentally program an error. And again, the way to turn that off, there's multiple ways. Let's look at the three. You can, of course, check it here. FileMaker, when you have the item selected, also has a checkbox down here where you can check and uncheck that, and also the layout settings itself. Now, there's multiple ways to access the layout settings. When you double-click the layout, it will bring up the Layout Setup dialog box. We'll click OK on that one. Also, when you're in the layout itself, you're actually working in the design mode, which I've just hit Command-L or Control-L on Windows. Here, you can actually go to the Layout menu, and you can then choose the Layout Setup menu. So this is basically the same way to access the same dialog. My preferred way, do it through the Manage Layouts. It's easy, it's right there. You can double-click. You don't have to go up to the menu and make the extra step, but it's just two different ways to get to the same dialog box. So another element that we want to take a look at, and this actually is a good reminder for me, is this Save Changes to Layout. And we saw in the very first video the Preferences setting that I believe you can turn this off. If it wasn't in that video, the very first time that this dialog shows, which is basically just being nice for you and prompting, do you want to save the layouts? I tend to like to check this box. I do not like to be asked because I like to go back and forth between layout mode and browse mode so much throughout the course of the day that this would be super annoying for me. I don't know how it is for you, but if you like to be reminded, of course, don't check that and you won't be reminded. Key thing to remember is in FileMaker 16 and later now, FileMaker does save the undo states of layouts when you move between browse mode and layout mode. So if I go into layout mode and I move this object and I go back into browse mode and now I'm going to go back into layout mode, if I choose to undo, FileMaker will put that back. In versions prior to 16, I believe, or 15, that was not the case. That's probably why that dialog is there, is that they want you to double check and make sure, do you really want to save this, because you would not be able to undo the layout. But now that dialog really doesn't serve much purpose. So knowing that we can double click on each of these icons in order to edit the different layout settings, we'll go through those. But a neat little thing to recognize is this little star right here, which shows up, and you may be wondering, what does that actually indicate? That indicates the script triggers on the actual layout. Now we're going to have to get into script triggers, and where I am is I'm at the very bottom corner of the layout, and FileMaker is showing this little icon of what are does this layout have script triggers, number one, and then what would they be? We'll take a look at those, but the key thing to remember about seeing things in FileMaker's layout mode is it's all controlled under that view menu. So when we go to the view menu, we'll select the layout itself, and we'll go to the view menu. The show submenu is where everything is controlled. What do you want to actually see? Do you want to see buttons, or whether an object is a button or not? Do you want to see sample data, text boundaries, field boundaries? And I'll go through a lot of these in other videos explaining why and how and where they'll be beneficial to you while we're working in layout mode. So let's take a look at some of the other settings here in the Manage Layouts. We, of course, can create these three different types of objects: the folder, the actual layout, and the divider. All of that is going to be done using our button down here at the bottom, where we can select on our new layout report a new folder or a new separator. Now personally, when I develop, I tend to not necessarily use FileMaker's wizards. FileMaker attempts to make everything really pretty easy, but once you get used to FileMaker and knowing that most all layouts, you want to modify them and that FileMaker is helpfulness isn't always as helpful. Sometimes with reports, it can be somewhat beneficial where you choose what the output is. It's going to be a report, in particular with envelopes, with reports, maybe with labels. These are probably the most helpful of the wizards. Otherwise, selecting on a particular layout for a particular device, I find it's just as easy to rearrange the layout. We'll be taking a look at that, but these, if you do like them and they're helpful, this form versus list versus table versus report, those can be helpful, but we'll take a look at what I suggest you should use with regards to settings when you're setting up your layouts. So we won't create that new layout for right now. Edit obviously is going to be the other way that you can bring up that layout setup. So there's a third way. You can access the menu, you can double click, or you can click edit. Duplicate is obviously very helpful when you have a template type of layout. And I oftentimes create template layouts and put them up towards the very top of the layout, manage layouts list. And I can just go down and click duplicate. And many times that layout will already have the pre-formatting that I want. That's as opposed to using FileMaker's wizard and having it walk through things. And of course, we've got the delete. And if you remember that option trick that I showed you in the previous video, if you want to forcibly delete something without a prompt, which I believe right now I click delete, yep, it's going to ask me. I'll click a duplicate of that, duplicate that one, hold down the option key, click delete, and it is forcibly gone. So as you're developing, if you know for sure and you get really comfortable with your skills, I just forcibly delete. Now the open one in this particular dialog is super helpful. It's very beneficial. In fact, we took a look in a previous video of how when we have multiple windows open, and I'm going to create another window here of the invoices and another window of the invoices, we took a look, and I'll go into browse mode with these layouts. So just Command B, Control B. We took a look at the window options that we have that allow us to tile horizontally, tile vertically, cascade, or bring all to front. Now the key thing here is FileMaker has this notion of hidden windows. So this particular window, if I want to hide this window, which I can do with this menu command right here of hide window under the windows, that will make that window hidden. And now what happens is in Windows in particular, these tile horizontally and tile vertically apply only to the visible windows. So when I tile these horizontally, what's really nice, or let's say I like vertically, let's go with that one. So it puts them side by side. So I want to see these two windows side by side while I'm developing, and I'm going to now go show my window of my invoices. That's a pretty nice thing because now I can work on my my current layout, but I can sort of move the window off to the side and check the windows in the back to see what information those windows have. When would you want to do this? Well, when you're going to use something that I call developer-specific layouts, and we're going to talk about these categories of layouts really quickly here. So I'm going to close these because I want to show you the advantage of that open button. So what you can do is however many layouts you have selected, you can do multiple things to those layouts. If I have all of these layouts, let's say plus the folder selected, if I don't want them to show up in this menu right here, I no longer want desktop to show up, I use the checkbox now and it unchecks all of them at one time. It's called a bulk action. And in FileMaker, doing bulk actions, whether it's in the designing the layout in your view, in scripts or what have you, bulk actions save you a lot of time and become really powerful. Well, this is going to be a little bit messy, but watch what happens when I select let's say all of these layouts minus the actual dividers. Now the separators you need to keep in mind, here's a little thing that goes back to FileMaker's history. FileMaker, when it was created, it really only supported actual layouts. And the way that they implemented separators was they created yet another layout and just gave it the name of a dash. But now that dash is simply a long divider called a separator, because if I double click this, it has layout setup settings. So when you choose this option down at the bottom from FileMaker to create a new separator, it's almost the exact same thing as creating a new layout. It's just blank and it uses the name of a divider. So it's an interesting little thing. You can sort of hide things on these layouts and you can see that the layout itself is named quite simply dash. And that's just something that historically has been part of FileMaker, and they've been kept moving that forward. But let's select all of those layouts if you want to follow along. I'm holding down the Command key on Macintosh, and it may be Control, Alt, or something on Windows, and I'm going to click the Open button now. And what's going to happen is all of those layouts are going to open all at one time. Now, when we get into those classes, which we're coming up to really quick here, are those classes of layouts, this becomes really cool, because when you're using a developer layout with the intention of that layout showing you all of the data that you want to see behind the scenes, it's not the data that you want to present. For example, in our solution, we're going to have these long strings of numbers, which are primary keys. They're ID numbers that uniquely identify each record. Let's say Mr. Smith. On your actual layout that you're going to be designing, that the user interacts with, you're going to put the fields of first name and last name. But what you're not going to put is probably this long string of numbers, which is an ID. It's going to be a hidden field with regards to what the user sees. But as you're developing, you need to see that information. You need to see what ID connects to the related table. So creating these developer tables and then opening them, being able to see them behind the actual view that you're working on, becomes very, very beneficial. But here again, by opening all of these, we could of course say tile horizontally all of them, and all of the windows will be there. Now, one of the things to note is that, like all environments, this can be, if you did this with 50 layouts, this would be a big hassle, and you'd have to click here and close this one, click here and close this one, and so forth and so on. Well, it turns out that yet again, our nice little option key, if you can see it right there, I'm holding it down as the menu is changing there for you. I'll zoom in. Look at what happens when I hold down the Option key to the Close menu. It turns into Close All. So if you want to basically close all of these windows really quickly, hold down that Command and Option key, and all of the windows, poof, will be gone. Of course, the last window that closes means that the file is now closed. So you have to go back, and I'm going to use my recent again and open that back up. One thing to notice right there, what happened, that was actually a very good thing to have happen. Notice that FileMaker actually saved whatever the last window was, it saved that state, where the window was on the screen, and then also the dimensions of the window. Of course, you can completely control that with scripting in terms of where that window pops up. In fact, you can make the window pop up in the dead center of the monitor and be the exact size that you want. All pretty, make a splash screen, things that we'll look at throughout the course of this series. So here's the last thing that I'm going to be leaving you with today about the Manage Layouts as I open that back up with Command or Control L if you're on Windows. I've pretty much gone through most of all of the settings of this Manage Layouts. One thing we will be going through upcoming is all of the different individual settings for layout setup. Let me zoom here so that we can actually get this on screen. There we go. We will be going through all of these different aspects of layouts in another video, but I just wanted to show you how you can access this dialog. And the thing that I'm leaving you with in this video are what I consider to be the classes of layouts. Now, the classes of layouts, as I have found them working with FileMaker for well over a couple of decades here, let's actually create a couple of new folders, and I will call them as such. And let's create a separator so that we can distinguish between these. So these are the classes of layouts that I've sort of found throughout my development career. It's really simple. It breaks down more or less into three groups. I have developer-specific layouts. Those are layouts that are going to contain and show things that only me or my fellow developers, if I'm collaborating, are going to see. No user is ever going to see that layout. The next class of layouts is one that's probably the most obvious. As I duplicate this folder and I rename here, is going to be user interface layouts. Now, that's pretty obvious. That's everything that your user is going to be able to see or interact with. Now, there's a third class of layouts, and I tend to group them. There's multiple different kinds, but I tend to group them into one overarching class, and that is utility layouts. I just think of them as If it's not something that the user is going to be looking at, it is a utility to facilitate the functioning of the application. And those utilities can break up into multiple different, well, there's only a few subclasses in the utility layout, and I will probably break them up like this. Print, or output, and if your solution is not actually outputting paper, if you're doing PDF, that falls into the same category. You have reports that are designed for output. So if you think of them as output, you can name this output instead of, let's say, print. But under the category of utility, you also have one other particular type of layout, and that one just ends up being, as you develop in FileMaker, there is one particular function called go to related records, where it allows you, based on a search that a user has done, if they've searched for all of the records that happened within 2017 that fall in a particular zip code, and you want to then manipulate those records. Many times, if you're looking at that data within a portal, that's this display object right here, that may not be what's loaded as the current found set. For example, a user, and I'll just go ahead and rename that right here. In my example, let's say a user had gone into FileMaker, they'd clicked into the search, they searched for a record, found Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith now is listing a number of invoices, and you now want to process those invoices. You want to do something to each of the 10 invoices that exist. Well, you have to use FileMaker's go to related records in order to load the found set of all of those invoices for Mr. Smith, but you need to do it in a layout. You need to do it somewhere. But this isn't a layout that the user is going to interact with, and it's not a layout that the user is going to actually use for output. So it's more or less a utility layout. So I call it utility. I've called them a few different things. I've called them things like process, or related, or blank even. Sometimes you'll create blank layouts that layout comes up, and it's just a blank layout that maybe has a little process indicator that shows you that something is happening. And meanwhile, you've written a script, and that script goes through each of those individual invoices. And it's just a nice thing to present to the user, but the user is never going to interact with it. So it's not really a genuine UI layout. So that's pretty much the classes that I use. I have a developer folder, I have a user interface folder, a utility folder. Usually the utility folder is above right here. Then within the user interface, that's when I start to break things down a little bit more. And that's where, in this scenario, you would probably find all of these breakdown of the desktop, iPad, iPhone, web, and so on. And we will get into some additional naming conventions that you can use, but that's my core separation. I want to be able to expand the developer layout and then select those tables that where I want to see the data and click open and open them all at once while I'm working on my user interface at the same time. So we're coming up on 28 minutes here, and I think we've got a lot of good content. Let's see what's going on with the chat, if we have any. We've got Pamela had mentioned a nice little hi. If anybody has any questions in here, we've got, it looks like 15 people on the stream currently, and probably many more watching, maybe not from the channel here, but I will switch to, there we go. We'll bring that on screen. So our question came in from Ahmed. Can we specify which menu set displays when a layout is active? Good question. And let's switch the desktop really quickly to take a look at that. One of the things that you notice here in terms of what it lists, I guess I should have mentioned that. On each layout, and we'll option expand that. On each layout, the things that this particular dialog expresses or shows us is first off the associated table, which becomes really handy because we know what layout this particular, or what table occurrence this particular layout is tied to. Also, we see the menu set. Now, this is going to be an advanced topic that we're going to look at when we look at the manage custom menus, and going into those details. But let's see, that's what I was wanting to switch to right there. this is actually going to be something that you can control on an individual basis of when a custom menu actually loads. We can see right here that FileMaker in its example is actually loading a menu named dashboard when you arrive onto the company dashboard. Otherwise, we have a file default, and we'll be taking a look at the file options. We probably should have looked at that maybe in video 2, but we'll be looking at that in a future video, where that actually is, what it controls, and what it does. But yes, each and every layout has the option to have its own menu system. So if I double click here, and we can see right here that we have the menu set, and we're able to change that right here. Now there's a ton of things you can do with custom menus. We'll be taking a look at that in depth when we go through that on that particular video, but that's a good question, and that's what's actually shown here and how you can access and control it. All right, so as it beeps up here, let me bring my questions on screen so that I can see them. Thank you, Richard. Richard, I'm doing this pretty much, if you're watching this live, I'm doing this every day, Pacific time, daylight time at 11 o'clock. For about 2 weeks, maybe I'll go 3 weeks. It really depends on how the content is shaping up. And Jeffrey, thank you for mentioning that they're helpful. I'm just basically figuring I would take FileMaker, delete my preferences file, and go through everything that you become exposed to before we actually start to build a solution. And that's my intention with this series. So if you have questions, you can always hop on the chat if you're on the real-time stream, and you can throw those onto the chat just before I start to record. Or if you're watching this after the fact, after it's been recorded and you have questions, I am also watching the comments, and will be doing so as people start to get exposed to this series. So please feel free to put those in the comments. Also, one of the things that you'll see is towards the end of this video, a link to subscribe on YouTube will actually appear, but if you are interested in more in-depth content and you have not been exposed to my magazine site, then let me throw that up over on Safari. Here's the website right here. It is ISO FileMaker Magazine. I feel like a promotion fiend because I show this each time, but I know that there are people that watch this that maybe they're trying to learn FileMaker and they don't know about the magazine site. I've been producing content since going back to, oh my gosh, 1995. Ooh, yeah, I'm old. But in this course in particular, you can click on this link right here. If this is still here as of the time of this video, this recording, this will put you on a notification list. I'll let you know like whether I'm not going to be able to do a video at the right time, or whether I'm going to be doing it at a different time. And of course, you can subscribe here if you want, but these videos are about, these are more intermediate and advanced videos. The series that we're doing here is for newer users who are trying to learn FileMaker and want to get familiar with that. So see if we've got a few more questions here. The Facebook's groups. Yeah, you can just go to Facebook. And then on Facebook, I believe, let me load that off screen because I don't know if my personal Facebook is going to actually show up here. You never know what details are going to show here. Let me switch to this. I know it looks funny when I'm looking off screen here. FileMaker Pro users, FileMaker Pro tips. All right, so here we go. Well, there we go. Facebook groups. Here is a tips Facebook group, and I appear on the groups occasionally if you have questions. Throughout this course, I will be making a private Slack channel that will be by invite, and you'll be able to actually ask more in-depth questions. I'll be able to help, but of course, doing that for hundreds and hundreds of people is very difficult to do for free. That is the FileMaker Group's tips right there, and then this is the other one right here of Facebook.com groups FileMaker devs. Another place, take a look at video number 2 or video number, actually I forgot to show that. There you go. That's what we're wanting to take a look at right here, the URL. My apologies about that. I didn't switch that video. Facebook.com groups FileMaker devs. But if you are looking for more places to have your questions answered, take a look, I think, at video number 2. I think we talk about resources. All right, so we're on 34 minutes, and my commitment is to keep these sort of short so that people don't feel like they're getting overwhelmed with an hour worth of content. It's so easy for me to just continuously talk about FileMaker that watching a YouTube video for 6 hours would be pretty phenomenal. But we have any more questions here with specifically regards to layouts. Ruben, how do you determine which layouts show up in the navigation menu when in layout mode versus browse mode? Good question. Let's switch to my desktop. Again, those are controlled where the layout actually shows up. It's in two places. I neglected to show you one of them. The first place is when the status bar is showing. That's all of this area right here. This is the first place where the user can actually access the layouts. The second place that a user can access the layouts is under the layout menu somewhere up here. I haven't used it in a while. Let me see if I can find that view. There we go. Go to layout right there. So in the menu itself, you have go to layout and whatever layouts are showed. And that is all controlled, again, by that checkbox on the side. Currently, all these desktop are not showing. If I check them, select all of them, do my bulk action and check, then they will all now appear in those menus. And again, the folder itself does determine whether or not those layouts will show up within the folder. If I uncheck this particular folder, notice that when I go to that view menu and layouts, it will show all of the layouts minus the folder. But if the folder is checked, then it will show the folder as a submenu with the layouts within it. So very good question there on that. So let's switch back here, see if we've got any more questions. Now they're coming in. Let's see. I was thinking you should share this channel with the group. Everyone loves value. Yes, please feel free to click the share link, to tweet out, and so forth. Again, the whatever's going to show up in terms of the subscribe at the end, that is a YouTube subscribe. You'll be notified when I'm going to start things if you use the mobile YouTube app. Otherwise, if you want to get notified by me, you can go to the magazine website, click that link, and then subscribe. So I think that's probably going to give us a wrap for this particular video. We're right on time here at about 37. I like to give us about 10 to 15 minutes for questions and feedback. We've focused on manage layouts, and I think that's going to do it for this particular video. So as I say in my videos on my magazine website, I'd like to wish everybody much luck with your database development, and until next time, see you later.